So good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Lanny Muehlrath, and I am here on Facebook Live today to share something that had came up as a response to last week's Facebook Live, where we talked about cravings, their sources, and what to do about them. And I invited people to write me and tell me what would you like to next address coming up on this series of mindful vegan moments. And I had several emails and messages asking about, can you please share with us and have a conversation with us about how we handle all of that's going on right now with the holidays, with office parties, with family feast, with drop-in this and that. And it's actually perfect timing because these things present themselves to us all year long. But there's a particular charging of the events that take place at this time of the year. So everything we talk about today can be, of course, applied to every other conversation, to every other time of year. But there's another layer to what happens around the holidays with family connections and the expectations, and it has its own stress level of its own. So this is what I'd like to do today. I want to start with a short story of my personal experience of the first time it became so clear to me that my mindfulness practice would make a difference in my daily conversations. And from there, I want to explain how to navigate these conversations, and particularly, we have conversations about all kinds of things in our lives. But for those of us who have chosen a plant-based nutrition path or a vegan path, find that there is a particular layer and level of stress to conversations or disquieting moments with conversations with others that can be particularly difficult to deal with because of the discomfort they cause within us. So after that, then I'm going to read a tiny portion from the chapter in the Mindful Vegan. As I said, this focus is on day 19 today. Oh, here's my Greg and Elephants. That's my bookmark. Higher ground and carefully navigating conversations. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why these challenges exist around food. We think it's obvious, but there's some deeper layers to it. And then, of course, we'll take a few minutes or a minute for mindfulness practice together. We're going to establish that and then answer some questions for you. And I anticipate maybe trying to move this. I set aside a half hour last time and we went like 50 minutes. So I've set aside a half hour this time, and in interest of everyone's busy schedule with a holiday comings and goings, I'll try to stick a little bit closer to a shorter time frame, but who knows? I am yours. So as promised, I would like to tell the story of the very first occasion I had to experience how my ability to navigate what could previously be a difficult situation was made so much easier as a direct result of my mindfulness practice. This was right after I had actually gone to my mindfulness meditation training. So look back like 25 years. And I had gone to a 10-day silent retreat because the whole idea was to really immerse yourself in the practices. So you weren't talking, you weren't doing engaging in conversations, you were removed from your usual life so that you could actually just be present with here you are, it's your body and your mind, now what are you going to do? And with the tools of mindfulness practice, as I give them to you in the book, those are the same things that we are practicing every day. The 10 days were passed, and I went directly from the retreat to meet with my parents. We were rendezvousing on the way to meet my husband, Greg, for a holiday we were going to go on together. And my parents and I went to this cafe for a lunch. Now, my relationship with my parents, I love my parents. We had a good relationship, but I always had this dynamic with my dad, whereby he and I tend to kind of like jockey a little bit with being very critical and judgmental of the other person. At least that was my perception of it. We never had a conversation about this, but it always seemed like those were the feelings that it brought up in me. If he had said something, I could tell I was scrambling for a way to counter it, and maybe vice versa. So we sat down to eat this meal, and I decided I am going to apply the very tools of mindfulness that I just practiced at the return, can I bring this into this conversation? And I'll describe later exactly what I did. I just want to tell you the result now. What happened was I had the best meal with my father and with my parents that I had had in a long time. And it opened up a whole new relationship between me and him, that we still had our ups and downs, but there was a new way of relating. And it was directly because I applied these tools of my mindfulness meditation practice. So we're going to loop back to this. So I'll tell you exactly how I did that when we get to that portion later in our conversation. What I'd like to do is jump right into now is the main idea of navigating these difficult conversations. And for those who have just to arrive, yes, we can have these difficult, challenging moments at any conversation any time of the year, but oftentimes they come to a head or are a little bit more acute during holiday times. We have traditional holiday meals. There's oftentimes the practice of an animal being at the center of the table and it's not alive. And this brings up all kinds of challenges, not only within ourselves, but within the conversations that ensue. So what kind of a presence can we bring to that to make the whole scene easier? In other words, what I'm not going to do is hand you a list of comebacks and quick things to say. Certainly it's good to have at your hand some tools that have worked in conversations for you, but it's more bringing this idea of presence that the mindfulness practice brings to you, because that is what made such a difference for me. Launching into this first, let's look at why this is so problematic initially. If you are at a family meal where there's a dead animal on the table or lots of animal products around, and there is that discomfort. And we, coming from where we are, we think if somebody knew, had any idea of the source or the problems behind what they're eating, certainly they would change. Or how can they, knowing how I approach all this, not open their minds and hearts to that and think, well, I'll do that too. What is it? And there's something called the meat paradox. And as I said, I write about this all in chapter 19, or day 19 in the Mindful Vegan book. So everything we talk about today is described in depth in here, so you have your handbook to go to. The meat paradox is whereby people, for example, say, I love animals, but they eat them. Now that's a simple way to put it. There's the whole idea behind, if we have this sense of that this food we have, there's an actual animal on it, and maybe we even start to notice that, animal, my dog, I love my dog and I cherish my dog, but now we have a cow or a pig and it's kind of in a different category. And this whole idea of loving animals while eating them is under the umbrella of the meat paradox. And what happens with the meat paradox is it creates problems in conversation in a way you may not necessarily have dived into before. And I like to bring this up because it really helps with our understanding of what people who may feel like they're on the other side of the fence or part of the problem, what they may actually be experiencing, and why this can create conflict. And to understand that their response, or actually their reaction, is not something that we have done wrong or that you should take personally. When someone is confronted with the idea that they love animals, but here they are eating them, immediately come up a couple of things. One is they're going to feel a challenge to themselves. There's a slight discomfort there. There's a disquieting state that arises. They may not cognize it. In other words, they may not think about it. Oh, here I'm doing this and I think this. It just becomes an uncomfortable situation for them. This starts to lead to a little bit of distance in the conversation. Whether or not you have done anything, simply by your presence, maybe just passing on the platter of meat, or simply they know exactly what your dietary choice is, it presents that discomfort to them. And rather than turn this to introspection, there is rather a desire on the part of the individual experiencing the meat paradox to stand more firmly behind their position. This is the way they've always done things, Why question what they've done? I'm comfortable with this, and I'm not comfortable thinking about it in another way. We don't enjoy feeling uncomfortable, right? So oftentimes you become the messenger that maybe someone will shoot. You know that idea about don't shoot the messenger? Just by the presence of the idea of vegan or vegetarian can kind of make that arise. So there will become a defense of how people are. And another way is they will think, you know, this is how I've always done things. My daddy did this before me. My family's done this. My parents have done this. So there's all kinds of reasons that someone may feel personally a bit threatened simply by someone else making another choice. And I think this is helpful to understand because this puts you in the position of, instead of coming back with reactivity of your own, having compassion for that and putting yourself in that person's situation of how they must feel very uncomfortable puts us in the place of how can we, without being permissive of behaviors, help create more ease around us. Not necessarily ease with what they're doing, stopping what they're doing. That's not your business. Your business is to be this beacon of light and a center of calm, and to diminish your own reactivity. And notice I've said reactivity several times. This is actually the crux of so much human misery. We're going to loop back to that when I describe that conversation with my parents. The reaction of the people experiencing the meat paradox are in reactivity. They may not be thinking through, well, why am I feeling this way, and trying to analyze it or be present with it anyway. They just have that experience of a reaction because they've done it. And you coming in possibly from your maybe many years, maybe even days or weeks, a month of feeling reactivity in a situation where there are animal products being presented, being served, which could be of great personal pain to you. Your reaction is to pull away, perhaps want to feel and judgment and all kinds of things going through our head. But the reaction is what causes the pain. Okay, are with me so far? Another thing that's important to bring up is, now that you know this, you have this idea, and it doesn't mean that you have to really analyze, it just means, can you be present with what that person may be experiencing? Instead of getting lost in your own story, which may be, what can I say to make this person understand? How can I bring them to enlightenment about this thing with animals? And this starts to create more and more stress within you, because remember, it's not necessarily what you say or what you do in the moment, it's how you are. And if you can bring to this table, this family table or this office party, a sense of confidence, quiet, and presence, and a deep sense of connection with who you are and what you represent, and grounded in what I found your mindfulness practice will do that so much for you, then you create a whole new energy in the situation. You can actually be present with that person instead of caught up in your history of arguments and reactivity. Remember, the idea behind mindfulness practice is that it's a specific form of mental training that reduces reactivity, which then cultivates positive brain states. So if you can keep that in mind, this is why the value of practice to reduce reactivity, so you can be more present. Now let me move ahead to the experience of the story that I opened with about being more present with my parents in a way that reduced that reactivity I had with my dad. For those who came in late, I'm retelling the story of meeting up with my parents right after a mindfulness retreat and finding a new way to navigate what had been a long time kind of a stressful relationship of judgment on and off with my father. Here's what I did. I decided that I would use my tools of mindfulness practice, which is actually watching our reactivity and learning how to create space around it so we don't just jump into those same traps over and over again. I thought, what if instead of having this reaction to my father, being in judgment about what he's going to say, because I know what he's going to say, I know who he is, and getting all built up in my own reactivity, I stepped back And I said, what if I just were to speak to my father as if he were someone I just met, who I didn't know? And that shifted everything entirely. There's another thing I did too. We'll go into that soon. But the first thing was, what if I just am present in this conversation? We do tend to give more honor and respect and listen better when we're just meeting someone, right? We have so much reactivity built up with people we've known for some time, whether it's family or co-workers. And this is why it's a really good, important place for you to bring in those tools of mindfulness. So that really helped me. And I listened to him. It was just a phenomenal experience. I felt so much open and better about it instead of being caught up in my own, like I said earlier, story about it. What I'd like to do is read just a little bit about navigating conversations, all right? Because to loop back to what I was saying, say you're at the family meal, the office party, and you feel compelled to say something. How can these people be eating these things when you know this, that, and the other thing? Generally, the facts at this point in time are not going to be what makes a difference for the other person, because they will just feel judged and pressed upon to make a difference. The best thing is to be present with it. So let me read you 2 paragraphs from day 19, and then we're going to take it from there. This is where it says, navigating conversations. No one feels good after being scolded. Generally, people recoil and become angry, defensive, or stubborn. To succeed in freeing people to express compassion, in other words, in their own lives with maybe what they choose on their plate, letting the beach ball rise to the surface, our natural compassion, and I have this analogy in the book, is like pushing a beach ball down. If you're using eating meat but feeling uncomfortable about it, we keep pushing it down, and it keeps rising to the surface. To open their hearts and minds and let the beach ball rise to the surface and unleash them from the meat paradox, our interactions must be rooted in empathy for and understanding of the uncomfortable inner conflict they may be facing. This is done through working with their motivations, fears, desires, and shortcomings, not through shame and hostility, like not pointing out, as much as you may want to do that. Whether you receive praise or blame in these interactions is out of your hands. You have to let go of having control over what the outcome or response to you will be, in favor of being at peace with your own integrity and knowing that the power of intention is the most important factor in everything you do. Your mindfulness practice will help you get out of brain lock with set patterns so you can respond to conflict and difficult situations with more finesse. It teaches you how to live more aligned with the ethical life to which you aspire, being kind in your words and your speech, being rooted in nonviolence, and doing everything you can to not cause more violence in your personal interactions. The very awareness and inner peace you cultivate with mindfulness can touch and awaken the same in others. So how do you best prepare for these conversations? Now that I've underscored several times that how the most important thing is the sense of presence that you bring to these conversations, to these events, by just being present without all the layers of reactivity. Mindfulness practice, as we do, the sitting practice that I teach through the course of the Mindful Vegan, is actually simply practicing non-reactivity. For those of you who have already been diving into the daily practice, where I ask you, I describe exactly how to sit, and we'll do it together in a minute, where to put your attention, and what your job is, which is to repeatedly bring your attention back to the point of anchor. So every time your mind wanders, you're bringing it back. Your mind wanders again, you bring it back. An emotion wells up, you bring your attention back. A thought comes up, you bring your attention back. Every single thought, emotion, anything that comes up, we have developed a habit of reactivity to it. And the reactivity is the quick lashing out, the urge to eat inappropriately, the instant judgment and dislike, all those things that then we regret later on, or just create so much discomfort within us. So by doing the formal practice, you are actually practicing over and over again, not running with that reactive thought, not going with that urge. This is why it's so uncomfortable for many people to get started with mindfulness meditation. We're not used to broadening that gap between an impulse of reactivity based on something we've done over and over again and letting it go by. Plus, we are given the tools with which to manage them. And that is, starting on day 8, is, oh, there's a deer walking by outside. I said to say, is to navigate instead, let the thought go, let the emotional idea go, the story go, and turn your attention to the physical sensations of your body that are telling you there's an experience going on. This brings you also right into the present moment as well as the breath, because feelings take place in the present moment. So when these thoughts come up, you don't push them away, you don't go with them, you simply allow them to be while you bring your attention back to your place of focus. So this is what I did with, when I bring it back to the story of my parents again, and the same thing that I do in every conversation as best I can to the best of my ability. We are all works in progress, but including all these family situations or the office party type situation. What I do is first be prepared as much as possible with a regular mindfulness practice, rather than waiting till the heat of the moment when some drama presents itself and hoping I can get it just right. It's like practicing anything. You get better and better at not running with all these urges, jumping into your story and being reactive if you are practicing it in your formal sitting time and then through the course of your day, every day. So as I sat down to my parents, first I said, okay, what if I'm just present here right now with my dad as if this is the first time we had a conversation instead of being so quick to judge. And right away, I was aware of my body and my mind kind of scrambling to do what it was used to with my dad for so many years, decades even. I could see these thoughts coming up. I could see the reactivity and I could feel it physically. Next time a reaction comes up, see if you can connect with what it feels like physically, because that's bringing it right into the present. So what I did while I'm listening to my father speak and being fully engaged with what he's saying, this has to do with listening to, which I write about more on day 19. There's a lot in there about listening. I also turned a portion of my attention to what was happening with my body. How was my body telling me that I was in some kind of reactivity or conflict? And without trying to suppress it, I would simply observe it and watch the sensations of it while having the conversation. And this is what allows you to kind of wash them out of your interior so that they become weaker and weaker as you are practicing being present instead of running with reactivity or running with a story or an urge or something based on past practices. You simply walk through it in the middle. This is what created a shift in the relationship with my father. It was a wonderful experience, that meal itself. And it's not like my dad and I never had our conflicts moving forward, but things were never quite the same from them. And that was very instructive in me for every other conversation moving forward in my life. So this is the same thing I use in family situations, office situations, daily life, is first, be prepared, and second, use those tools that you've been practicing in your formal practice to let go of reactivity and thought and emotion. So here's what I'd like to do right now. Let us take a minute to do mindfulness practice together. Sound good? All right. For those of you who know the setup, and if you don't, I'll just walk you through it. Position is to simply take a position. If you're in a chair, I'm standing right here by my in my study by my work desk, so that's going to be my position. You want to have your spine erect and yet relaxed, so you're alert and attentive, yet you're not rigid. This is a practice of love and compassion, remember that. Second is anchor. You're going to bring your attention right to the anchor point, which is the place right beneath your nose and above your upper lip where your breath enters the body. The point of this is to bring yourself right into the present, because a breath takes place in the present, and also to feel the breath. Don't think about it, count it, visualize it. The point is to feel it, because feelings are very present as well. Next is intention. We're going to sit for a minute today, so I'll count the time out so you don't have to worry about setting a timer. The intention is to be together in formal practice for 1 minute and to bring with you an intention of kindness and patience and equanimity, which means as many things as you may have to do and as busy as you are, that's like an object. It's a bubble in your brain. You can pop it and let it go away. Just tell those things, yes, those things are important, and we'll get to those in a few minutes. And then the fourth is R, which is remindfulness. So every time you remember that we're doing a focus on the intention of being present here for this full minute, you bring your attention back and repeat that over and over again. So let's go ahead, close your eyes, and let us begin. Where are you now? Keep coming back. Kindly, patiently. And gently take a nice deep breath. And slowly open your eyes. And here we are. Thank you for that moment of practice with me. What I'd like to do now is see if there's a point of conversation or any questions about this, either the practices themselves, how you can apply it, and how it may make a difference for you moving forward into this busy season and beyond. And while we're having some thought time here, I also want to point out the important element, which is also covered in Day 19. I actually made it the mindful moment is timing. It may be that you have an opportunity to share your convictions, or you're asked about, maybe say you're at the dinner table and someone goes, oh, so you don't eat meat? And then they'll say, why is that? Or they'll ask some kind of provocative question. And the important thing to remember, I think, is your immediate urge may be that you want to tell them, or it may be kind of you feel frozen because you feel there may be a lot of judgment around you at the table, or you feel like you might put a kibosh on the calm at the table. And it may be that that's not the best time to actually venture forth and talk about why you do what you do. And it may be that the person themselves, in their own discomfort, didn't know else what to say. So, oh, why is that? Or maybe have some kind of a sarcastic or snarky comment about your choices. We've all experienced that, at least I have. And if you think back to the meat paradox and the pain that and discomfort that someone else may be experiencing, even though it looks like they're kind of coming down on you, this can open up a new space for being present with these people with your heart open and yourself being kind. So rather than, usually at the family table is not the best time to launch into, what happens to the dairy cows when they're done milking, or what happens to the veal calves, or calves that are now called veal, or any of those things. It might be good instead to say, oh, were you really interested in finding out more about that? And I'd be happy, maybe after dinner, we can get together and spend a little time. So you've actually addressed, you've responded with a generous, kind comment, but you haven't felt put on the spot. So timing can be really important in all of these situations. Yeah, Leave says, the dinner table is the worst time to talk about veganism with non-vegans. Yes, that's correct. So bringing it up, and like we talked about earlier, if you come in with shame and blame, it is not what's going to make hearts open. It's probably going to make people dig in deeper. As a matter of fact, that's one thing I wanted to bring in here as we're kind of wrapping up, is there is a very important thing to keep in mind that I talk about in this chapter, and that is the self-affirmation theory. We all are more willing to be open to suggestions and ideas from others if we don't feel like our basis for living and who we have always been is being threatened. If we have been edified in some way that reinforces our sense of being a valid human being, then the inner self relaxes and is more apt to be willing to engage in other ideas and other conversations. So how does this play itself out? If in conversations with individuals or in group settings, can you find the positive in what's the people are around you or the places? Can you connect with those people in a compassionate and kind way, whether it's the setting on the dinner table that's been carefully put together, some really delicious vegetarian or vegan dish that's been put together, something that a person's accomplishment or a way of being that's solidifies and actually helps buoy them up a little bit. And it's like I said, it's called the self-affirmation theory. And I would like to give you another resource for how to engage in these conversations, whether it's timing or what you say, and considering all of these things, is a new book out by Melanie Joy. My friend Melanie, Dr. Melanie Joy, just wrote a new book. She's the one who wrote Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows, and I kind of get the animals mixed up, but I think you're familiar with the title. She has a brand new book out. It actually came out the same day as The Mindful Vegan, and it's called Beyond Beliefs. And Melanie is a psychologist. So in this book, she dives into what is it with these relationships, and how can we have conversations from vegan to vegetarian, from vegan to omnivore, from omnivore to vegetarian, all of them, mixed up. What are some considerations that we can have in place? And I'm also really excited that Melanie listed The Mindful Vegan in her book as a resource for people like us who have this other layer of stress to our lives. We're trying to make a difference. We see social injustice that is being done, and we want to change that. And yet it just continues day after day. It's always going on out there, and we're deeply, painfully aware of that. So she recommends that as the ground of self-care is to do some kind of mindfulness meditation. So I'm very excited that she refers to my book. She even puts a slide up on it in her trainings for her vegan activists. So Beyond Beliefs is the name of her book, and I'll see if I can get I'll get a link for you up in the program notes. So let's see if there's any questions that have come in. Yes, bring delicious vegan food instead and go from there. And yeah, and I didn't even bring that up in this conversation. I was in a video interview earlier this morning, and we talked a lot about that. So very important. If you can be the bearer of good tidings, which is good food, and it has to taste good. This is not the time to bring a bowl of bark with no salt and no sugar on it. It's the time to bring something that is, yes, can be healthful, but also has good flavor to it. We need to win hearts through stomachs. This has always been the truth, hasn't it? And even more so when we're asking people to move away from what may have been their long cherished beliefs about who they are and what they eat into a new realm. So this is a really good way to show love and appreciation for others. Thank you, Lee. I hope this has been helpful to you. And in parting, what I would like to do is underscore the value of the daily mindfulness practice that you are putting in place. This will give you far more benefit than going to some kind of an event with all these sentences and comebacks planned in your head. Because the real issue at these events is not necessarily the details of the conversation, it's who you are as you come to these events. What is your presence? How can you open up someone else's feelings of ease and compassion and kindness so that they can let go of that grip on the beach ball, pushing down their natural capacity for kindness and compassion, and actually let it spring to the surface? We can help make that safer for them to do by letting them know that they are a safe environment, and that is you, a kind and caring and present person. That said, my friends, thanks again for joining me today, and I appreciate so much. Be sure to leave your comments about what you might like to adventure into on our next Mindful Vegan Moment. I'm deeply honored that you joined me, and have a great day today and rest of the week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.